Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for making it here in the bad weather. It has been raining outside, and some colleagues have told us that it was quite hard for them to get here. So, thank you very much. So, first of all, a very warm welcome from the entire CPD committee, the entire management committee of ICAP Canada chapter. So this session is about paving your way into advancing your career into Canada. We had gathered feedback that this would be the most important thing that you'd like to hear. We've had a lot of influx of newcomers, and also there are regarding the job market, there have been changes. So we understood you'd like to change jobs as well. So here's the first session for you. First session, because we'll be getting into details of every aspect of this session, like interviewing skills, resume writing, and all of that. Rafi, our speaker, would be getting, let's say, a summary of each of these topics for you so that you can start into the market. We hope you can make the best out of this session. So just take it as your first session within the series of it. Just a short note that each of you is unique. You have your own circumstances. So these are all general standards that apply to several people. But in let's say unique circumstances, unique things do apply as well. So please learn all the general things, but just make sure that you have your own personal circumstances into your mind as well. For your suggestions and feedback, we'd really like to hear back from you. So there are two ways we can do that. First, and the most preferred way is doing an online survey that we'll do at the end of this session. For that, we have actually a Wi-Fi connection for you. The Wi-Fi boards and their details are right on my right, which will be to your left. The Wi-Fi password and login details are here. We've got a prayer area in the room. We've got guests here that can guide you to washroom locations as well. There's a CPD sign-up sheet as well. I hope all of you have signed up to that. If not, please do so, especially the ICAP members, so we could give your details to our institute. So now I'll come straight to the topic and our speaker. Our speaker today is Rafi Tuglian. I hope I had the name correct. He's the VP at IFG. IFG must be known to most of you. It's the International Financial Group. It's a global organization that offers human capital solutions. Rafi leads a team of designated professionals who focus on project, interim, and permanent search services, specifically in accounting and finance space. Prior to joining IFG, Rafi has spent 13 years in progressive roles with the global and specialized recruitment firm, which also focuses on accounting and finance. And you'll be glad to know that Rafi has filled over 2,000 positions in his career. Rafi has also held roles with 2 Canadian banks, big 5 banks. In addition, he has also frequently spoken at colleges, universities, community outreach programs on topics such as job seeking, resume writing, and interviewing techniques. Please give a warm round of applause for our speaker, Rafi.
Hopefully this is close enough for the people on the web and they can hear the microphone. So, good evening, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Rafi, and I really have been a part of filling 2,000 jobs in the 15 years or so that I've been doing this. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody tonight. I did want to introduce a couple of my colleagues as well, very quickly. This is my colleague, Kelly McFeeder. She's a CPA CA and has been with IFG for 5+ years now. Originally from RBC before that, and then one of the big 4 firms as well. And I've also brought along my colleague Nabil, who is a CPA CGA, ACCA, and as I found out yesterday, is not technically his CA from Pakistan as of yet, but he's almost there. So everybody will be here to lend their expertise for any specific questions that they may have at that time. Here. Fashion. Where's my page now? Oh. That's that one's. Hold on. Yeah, we're good. So just a quick little briefing about IFG and who we are. We're an international boutique firm that specializes in finance, accounting, tax, and the audit niche. 15 offices in North America, including Toronto, Mississauga, and Calgary. We're actually incubating a North York office out of the downtown office as we speak. We focus on full-time, so permanent and contract placements, mainly from the mid to senior level space. So our candidates are typically near or completed designation. I'm very happy to share with all of you that we're actually launching a more junior focused division. We launched this week with a couple of individuals because we felt we had seen quite a bit of requirements come through from the accounting operations side that were a lot more junior, so we thought we might as well take advantage of that. So we're now focused on that level as well. And key to note, all of our internal business development people and our recruiters, as you've seen from our two individuals here, are actually designated CPAs. And if you totaled up everybody within the company, at least even just in the Toronto market, we'd have over 150 years of recruitment industry experience. So just a quick little run through of some of the things we'll be covering today. So the first thing we'll look at is the current hiring environment. We'll talk about some of the industries that we've seen a big uptick in and look at some of the skill sets that are in demand within those industries. We'll talk a little bit about how to work with recruiters and how best to market yourself and sell yourself using a recruiter. We'll talk about some of the resume writing do's and don'ts, which to some people might seem very obvious and to other people might be doing things that they thought were correct and find out that it's probably not the best thing to be doing. We'll talk about some interview tips, and then we'll open the floor to questions. So first and foremost, in terms of the hiring environment, we are at the lowest unemployment that we've been in 4 decades, so 5.8% according to StatsCan most recently. So this has made it extremely competitive both for the employee and the employer. So what happens is employers obviously need to attract top talent, and so the opportunities that they're providing need to be growth opportunities, meaning you have to see a clear path for yourself within that organization. What's my next potential role within that company in order for that potential employer to be attracted to be attractive for you. I would also add, full-time, interim and contract and project work is extremely popular right now. So don't shy away from contract or project work or temp work, whichever way you want to call it. It's a great way into the marketplace, and it's a great way to get your foot in the door within an organization. And the other thing to note is, even though compensation is rising, non-monetary incentives have become very popular. So what I mean by that is it's not always all about money. If you're faced with an opportunity and maybe the dollars aren't exactly where you want them to be, nowadays to be competitive, companies are offering a lot of other things that you may not have even thought of, and some you would have, but the point is that they're much more negotiable now. And these would include things like vacation, RSPs, stock option, flex hours, gym memberships, in some cases, hoteling or work from home opportunities. So these are all things to keep in mind when you're considering potential full-time opportunities. And the other thing to note is hiring is going on across all levels. I just had mentioned that, the reason why we launched a whole other division was because we felt like we were missing out on that the more junior level accounting operations business. When you think about an accounting department, typically it's divided up 60% accounting operations, 40% finance. So there's a whole level of that day-to-day clerical, roll up your sleeves accounting that's out there that you should be considering as well. So the job market is obviously very tight right now, but it's very competitive for both sides. Employers are competing with each other for candidates that are on the market. That also means that it's extremely competitive for candidates because you're up against everyone in the marketplace that is looking for a great opportunity. And obviously, there's different things that I'm witnessing for the first time. I have been at this since pre-2008 recession when the market was absolutely booming back then. And then for probably about 4 or 5 years after that, it was like scratching and clawing to have to find job opportunities for people. it didn't quite recover with the same kind of explosiveness as it did pre-2008. So I would say post 9/11 recession, where it was kind of slow up until 2008 when things were just booming. And then there was that 4 or 5 year period where the global economy wasn't doing so great. This time it was much more gradual, but we're actually at a point right now that far surpasses where it was pre-2008, because we haven't had these types of unemployment levels before. So the one new thing that we've seen a lot of is candidates are seeing multiple offers, counter offers, job opportunities come to them that they might have interviewed for back in January. And, probably 6 months to a year ago, if we were working on a permanent opportunity, you have a candidate lined up, they're ready to sign the offer, you think, done deal. But all of a sudden the candidate's telling you now, yeah, you know what, my current employer's given me a counter offer or something else has come up. The point of all that is that's how hot the market is right now. So there are opportunities out there for everybody. It's just a question of finding them. Some of the hot industries that we can speak to. So first of all, when it comes to public accounting, we're probably best to speak to small and mid-sized firms. I know we're standing in KPMG's building, or the title of the building anyway. But like the big four don't have trouble finding people because they have lineups of people that are trying to get into them. They have extensive campus recruitment programs, and not to mention everybody would love to be able to put KPMG, EY, Deloitte on their resume. But that also makes it extremely competitive. And obviously for a small to mid-sized firm that's out in the market, that then makes it more difficult for them to be able to attract top talent because everybody wants the big name on their resume. But for somebody who's looking to get into the marketplace, obviously, that would make more sense for you to then open yourself up and consider some of these small and mid-sized firms, which is probably a benefit to you from your profile perspective because you'll get to do more. You'll get to handle more of a file working at a small or mid-sized firm versus when you're working at a larger firm. Banking and financial services, as my friend Kelly here can attest to, is absolutely booming. We see tons of project work when it comes to the banks, and we've seen a definite uptick in permanent hiring as well. There's a lot of regulatory change and the technology change that's going on with the banks that's driving all of this, but obviously a lot of that spills over into finance functions. So the banks are very popular right now too. Healthcare has always been a strong industry for all the years that I've been doing this. Obviously, we are a government-funded healthcare system, and so the government always tries its best to make sure that there's a lot of money flowing through to healthcare, and it's just been one of those industries that I've noticed has always been steady with hiring. Real estate and property management, right now with the amount of development that's going on and the money that's being poured into construction and new offices, not to mention, I know firsthand from a friend of mine that's a commercial real estate representative that there is 1% vacancy in most of downtown right now. Everything west of, I think he said Spadina, was 1% vacancy, and everything east of is pretty slim as well. So obviously there's much more development going on and a lot more business with respect to real estate and property management. Professional services firm, when business is booming, there's more deals getting done, so law firms are busier. Obviously with respect to construction, that'll spill over into architecture and engineering as well. And then the other big one that I would talk about is startups that have opened up a whole new world in terms of potential employers. Obviously, with startups, there's a risk, but obviously there could be a great reward with it. And sky's the limit as far as the amount of opportunities out there with startups right now. Everything from Bitcoin trading to fintech to app development to who knows what. There are all kinds of opportunities that you could consider with respect to startups. So some of the hot skills in demand, first and foremost, without a doubt, professional accreditations. So the CPA designation is probably by far the most popular skill that's in demand. CPAs, like clients want to see people who have demonstrated progression in their career that are actually working towards something. And if there's an opportunity for reciprocity for yourselves, if you're a foreign designated, which I wouldn't know all the ins and outs about, but it's something you should definitely look into. I know firsthand from Nabil, he told me that when he came over, because he was an ACCA, he managed to get his CPA CGA in no time. So definitely make sure you're looking into reciprocity opportunities. When it comes to cross-functional expertise, So employers today want to see people who can handle more than just one particular function. They want to see potentially somebody who can do the general accounting, but get involved with the financial planning and analysis as well. Or we were talking about the startup perspective, the finance function could expand into things like supply chain. It could expand into securing financing. It could expand into decision making on whether you want to offshore certain job functions or whatever the case may be. So it's much more about now, more than just what your day-to-day function is and how much else you can leverage in your professional skill set to aid a potential employer. And then by and large, and I can't stress this one enough, would be your interpersonal and communication skills. So by interpersonal skills, we're not just talking about being a nice person. We're talking about, from a professional perspective, things like how do you receive feedback? How do you conduct yourself on a day-to-day basis with superiors, with people who might be, reporting to you or whatever the case may be? It's your general conduct from a day-to-day basis within the office, and just making sure that you're being respectful and mindful of other people at all times. When it comes to communication skills, and I know this, and I try to be as blunt and open with this topic as possible. Obviously, we probably have a lot of new Canadians in the room. By and large, the most important skill that you need to develop is going to be your communication skills. And so there's a lot of things that you need to do and to consider what you're going to do to help improve yourself. Now, that could be something as structured and formal as an ESL course, if necessary, English as a second language, if necessary. But more and more, it's what you do on a day-to-day basis to practice. Nobody's saying lose your heritage, but if you're going home every day and you are speaking in your mother tongue, your first language, to your families, to your kids, and that's what you're doing exclusively, you're not helping yourself. You need to make sure that you are practicing your communication skills at all times. And then spill that over into whatever it takes to practice and develop beyond that. So if, for example, if the first step is, and I always use this example, the Toronto Sun. The English is a little bit simpler in there, a bit more easier to understand. Stick with the Toronto Sun until you're more comfortable. Move on to the Toronto Star. When the Toronto Star becomes more comfortable, move on to the Globe and Mail, move on to Maclean's, move on to the Financial Post, whatever it is. But make sure that you are doing yourself the favor to practice as much as possible, because as much as we would love to constantly communicate in our mother language, it is important that you're practicing and developing as much as possible, because the first thing a potential employer is going to rate you on is going to be your communication. Obviously, also very important is technical proficiency. So when we talk about advanced Microsoft Excel skills, if I asked everybody in here right now what level Excel user they were, I guarantee you 99 out of 100 people are going to tell me they're an advanced user. And then we're going to start digging down on what advanced means, and they're going to tell me, well, I can do formulas and functions and charts and graphics, and I hate to break it to all of you, but that's not advanced. Excel, very much like playing a game of golf, has no limit to how good you can be at it. You can just keep getting better and better and better. But in reality, if you are not at a VBA coding level, and by that we mean actually writing code, going in, debugging macros, looking for errors, whatever the case may be, you're probably not a true advanced Excel user. Having said that, not everybody has to be VBA level, but it certainly doesn't hurt to be at that stage. But obviously getting yourself to a point where you're comfortable with macros, both recording and manipulating and potentially debugging, pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, the more you can do, the better, because it is going to be the most fundamental technical skill that you are going to need to leverage in any accounting or finance function. And no matter which job description we take from a client, I've never had one where they said Excel wasn't necessary. When it comes to software packages, Tier 1 ERP packages are going to be the most attractive for you. And so by that, we mean SAP, Oracle Financials, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, MS Dynamics, which used to be Great Plains. Obviously, it's not easy to automatically get exposure onto these packages, but I'm putting it there so that everybody knows when it comes to attractiveness, this is going to be the most attractive to the larger scale employers within the marketplace. But for people that are arriving, if you don't have QuickBooks or you don't have Sage, you need to get it. And we held a discussion before this presentation to talk about certain things to provide advice. I will never stand in front of a room and tell anybody go pay thousands of dollars for an SAP certification, because for all the years I've been doing this, the piece of paper doesn't mean anything to the employer. The hands-on experience is what matters. So save your money and don't go enroll yourself in an SAP course, because nobody's going to hire you because you have that on your resume. However, if I was going to give you a piece of advice, if all you have is a foreign software right now, it might be worth taking a night class at a community college and enrolling yourself in a QuickBooks or Sage course, because for the most part, all the small to enterprise private businesses are running one of those packages, and you need to open that market up to yourself. So if you've got Tally from back home, it's not enough. And as much as you're going to try and sell me that Tally is quite similar to our QuickBooks, it's not enough. Make sure, and again, I stress this, if you're going to invest something when it comes to training on a local package, that would be my recommendation, a community college or one of those private business colleges to get yourself some QuickBooks or Sage experience. And then I've listed off a couple of industry-specific softwares. So if you're targeting yourself to a particular industry, Elite Enterprise is very common in legal, as is a system called Adorant. MRI is very common to property management. Deltec comes up a lot in engineering and architecture. And then what's changed now that didn't necessarily exist so much as I was working through my many years in this industry is a lot of these new technical packages that are important. So for example, business objects and other business intelligence software have come to the forefront. SQL programming and data mining skills are now very popular. And then we've had more than one occasion systems like Tableau and Spotfire, which are data visualization and analytics softwares. So if you can manage to get yourself some kind of hands-on experience on these packages, it'd be very useful as well. I just wanted to give a snapshot in terms of skills in demand for some of the traditional positions. And I know these are a wide range because I was trying to encompass various levels of experience as well as various segments of the marketplace, because a small to mid-sized firm may not be able to pay as much as a large-sized firm. So that's where you see the bottom end to the top end. So you see controllers from 90K to 140K, a financial analyst for financial planning and analysis, 60 to 80, an SFA anywhere from 65 to 85, 70 to 90, staff accountant, tax accountant, and accounting operations was the biggest because that could include anything from the most clerical level, we're talking data entry of payables, receivables, to maybe more of a junior bookkeeper or full cycle bookkeeper. So now let's talk about some of the more non-conventional positions that are out there. So we all know the typical bean counting, accounting and finance type positions, but these are some areas that have risen to popularity, and very much so in Kelly's world and expertise, because we obviously see a lot of these things come through from the big banks. So with finance business transformation, we're talking about things like digitization. A lot of companies that are moving digital, moving to paperless, moving to optimizing processes. So it's individuals who are looking at current state and then mapping out what future state could look like and how finance applies in that project. And business intelligence system implementation, there's always a finance component when it comes to a large-scale system implementation, and that can be anywhere from the project manager, which spills over into the next piece, the person who's actually leading the project, to the individuals who, at the very lowest level, might just be reconciling data to ensure that one information is getting one system is getting the information properly from the old system. And we talked a little bit about data analytics and how important that's become. Very much so a role and a skill set that is probably non-conventional, but is much more in demand nowadays. When it comes to working with recruiters, some of this stuff probably will sound very common sense, but you'd be surprised how often common sense is not so common. So the first thing that I would let everybody know is working with a recruiter should be treated like working with the employer. You should treat that interview, you should treat that entire process no different than you would if you got the call from KPMG. So by that, I'm telling you, treat the interaction with the utmost professionalism right from the get-go. And that means be on time for your interview, return phone calls, be timely with returning emails, whatever the case may be. If you would do those things for your job interview with KPMG, you should be doing those things for your job interview with the recruiter. Apply for what you're qualified for. It is nice to believe that when we look at a job description, you can say, well, I can do that. But if you haven't done it, you're not qualified for it. And that's from the recruiter's perspective. Keep in mind, a recruiter on our end is marketing a profile to a client that, to be frank and honest with you, they're selling. We are getting a fee for the person that we're putting forward. So the employer has to look at that and say, are you giving me everything that I'm asking for here? They're coming to us with a shopping list, and we are delivering the shopping list to them. So as much as you may believe you can fulfill what's on that shopping list, if you haven't done what's on the shopping list, you're not qualified for the job. And so focus on the things when you look at job descriptions, really break it down and look at it and say to yourself, have I done this? And apply for those roles specifically. Attention to detail. Keep in mind you are being evaluated from your very first interaction. And I'll touch upon this, I think somewhere else in the presentation, because there's one that gets me all the time. My name is Raffi, R-A-F-F-I. It appears on my email, on my LinkedIn, on everywhere. It is not Ravi. It is not R-A-F-I. It is R-A-F-F-I. If everybody in this room is in a function that is specifically geared towards attention to detail, you are accounting and finance people, your whole world is attention to detail, and you're spelling my name wrong, what does that tell me about your qualification as a candidate? I know it sounds small, I know it sounds trivial, and that's not the only thing that's out there that people are doing, but it's those little things that will separate you from the very competitive market that I talked about before, and the candidates that are making sure that they're getting all their checks and balances correct versus the one that didn't take the time to spell the employer's name correct. Take constructive criticism. So as I'm standing here telling you, apply for the job that you're qualified for, sometimes when you're talking to a recruiter, they're going to walk through a job description with you and they're going to explain to you why you're not the right person for the job, why they can't sell you on that particular opportunity. Don't get defensive about it. They're doing what's in everybody's best interest, your best interest, their best interest, and the client's best interest. So it's better to actually take the feedback. And as I'm standing here today and telling you about the mistakes people make with my name, maybe one of you emailed me and sent me RAFI. Don't take offense by it. Learn from it. Or if you're sitting in front of a recruiter and they're walking you through things about your resume that you might want to consider changing, it should be something that you take as a learning experience. Whether or not it was reviewed by 5 of your friends or you went to a resume writing service or whatever the case may be, they're telling you from expertise that they know this is the way something should be structured, this is the way it should be tweaked, this is the way it should be worded. Be responsive, return calls and emails in a timely manner, so nothing probably frustrates or drives us more crazy than when somebody has sent you an application for an opportunity and now you're getting the call from us because you actually match up with the potential job that we're looking at, and we're waiting days. Or, I mean, at that stage, if you're looking for a job and you're not working, you should be returning that call within hours. It really shouldn't take that long. I know that if I was on the job market looking, I'd be waiting for my phone to ring all the time, and the minute I get a call or a voicemail, I'd return that call right away. And if we're sending emails, don't sit on the email, return the email as fast as you can. Be honest about things. So don't dress up your resume with things that are not necessarily 100% true. And more importantly, if you're talking to a recruiter and they just want to get a gauge of where you're at in your job search, do you have other interviews on the go? How deep into an interview are you, or whatever the case may be honest with them. Because there's a reputation at stake there from both sides, that if we're putting you forward and we're telling a client, yes, this person is 100% available, they're committed, they're in love with this opportunity, and then the client says, okay, send them in, that's who I want to meet with, only to find out that you've pulled out because you didn't tell us about another opportunity or whatever the case may be. It's mud on our face. It's a waste of the client's time. And if that client's already seen your resume, it doesn't look good on you either. So just be honest throughout the entire process. And that spills over into the next piece when I talk about don't harm the relationship. So, if you've gone that deep and you've decided, you've told your recruiter, yes, I'm going to accept that offer, or whatever the case may be, live up to your commitments. If you're working on contract and you've accepted an assignment, don't leave a voicemail on Sunday night saying you're not going back into work on Monday morning. Treat your contracts with the same type of decorum and respect that you would a full-time job. I would expect people to give notice the same way that they would on a permanent full-time role that they would on a contract. So don't undermine the fact that it's just a contract. It's equally important. And of course, if you're doing that, you're not harming the relationship. A couple things as it relates to resume do's and don'ts. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to back it up really quick because I noticed I had a couple of notes here that I really wanted to talk about when it comes to working with recruiters. Don't depend exclusively on a recruiter for your search. That's probably the best advice I could give you. And sometimes I used to ask people when I had them on the phone, they'd complain to me and they'd say, you know what, I was registered with you for 3 months and you haven't brought me any opportunities yet. And the first question I would ask them is, what are you doing for your own job search? And they would say, well, I'm applying online on Indeed and I have my resume on Workopolis and I'm checking LinkedIn every day. Do you know what that is? That's called surfing the web. It's not a job search. It's playing on internet all day. How many live people have you spoken to? That's a job search. How many doors have you knocked on? That's a job search. So by that I'm referring to good old-fashioned job search techniques, and believe it or not, they still ring true today to do the exact same things. So get out there and knock on doors. I have a policy within our organization. I carry this over from the last place that I was, but that doesn't mean everybody show up at our door tomorrow. But if somebody walks into our office and comes into reception and has their resume and asks reception, can I meet with somebody? All my staff knows somebody better get up and go meet this person. Because if I'm telling people on the phone, you're not conducting a job search by being online, and somebody actually takes the advice and puts a suit on, which by the way, if you're going to do this, get dressed up, and takes the time to come into the office with a resume and wants to meet face to face, somebody better spend 5 minutes with them just to go out there and talk to them. That doesn't mean we can help everybody. Maybe sitting down with them for the 5 minutes to instruct them on where they should be best targeting their job search is the help they were looking for. And I strongly recommend that for any agency. If you're looking for accounting and finance, we're not the only show in town. Go knock on other doors. Get out there and talk to the Randstads, the Hayes, the, God dare I say it, the Robert Halfs of the world. Yeah, we can laugh. If anybody hasn't looked at my LinkedIn profile, that's where I was. But yeah, get out there and knock on doors. And I can assure you, somebody from there is going to come out and spend 5 minutes with you. Don't expect hours of their time, but they more often than not will give you 5 minutes to at least send you in the right direction. Besides that, make sure you've taken the time to put together an elevator pitch of yourself. Does everybody know the expression of the elevator pitch? I'm seeing some nodding heads. So I'll explain really quickly. If I was on an elevator with you and we had a certain amount of floors to go down and you had to sell yourself to me by the time we got to the ground floor, that means you have to be concise and you have to be to the point and you have to get across the best thing about you that's going to make me say, hey, I might want to hire this person, right? So take some time to put together your elevator pitch and then pick up the phone and cold call. Call potential employers. Make a list of 10 companies that you really want to work for. And if you're all going to focus on TD and RBC and BMO and CIBC and KPMG, then you're all just going to be back here for the next session. But take a look at the mid-market. There's a lot of other companies out there, and maybe there's an industry you're in love with. Maybe there's an industry that makes the most sense for you based on your profile. Maybe you've worked on one of those large-scale ERP packages and you just need to find out who else out there is working on them because that's what they want to see. People who are going to hit the ground running, they're going to have minimal ramp-up time. And pick up the phone and say, hi, my name is Rafi. This is my background. These are my technical skills. I'm wondering if you have any opportunities. And you're going to hear no 99 times before you hear yes. But you have to appreciate how annoying no is going to feel before you can appreciate how amazing yes will. And you're going to get pointed towards HR, and you're going to get pointed towards different people or whatever the case may be. But A, it's going to improve your network. And B, one of those people are going to say, you know what? Send me your resume. I'm actually curious now. And maybe they won't have something today, but they'll have something in a few weeks or a couple months or whatever the case may be. Or maybe they know somebody who's looking. And then, of course, when it comes to networking, let your networks know that you're looking for a job. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends and family or put it out on your LinkedIn that you are currently seeking an opportunity, and get out to job fairs. Talk to people live. That's obviously the other way that we're going to improve our communication skills if we feel that we have to. The more live people we're talking to, the closer we are to a job opportunity versus sitting at home and clicking send on that next online job application, which for all of us, when we click send, do we know where our resume is going? Big black hole. Not to mention online, you're competing with everybody that has a cable connection, right? So get out there and talk to people. Some things with respect to resume do's and don'ts. So we're going to talk about a functional versus reverse chronological versus a combination resume. We're going to cover some resume basics that, believe it or not, I call them basic, but knowing that there's probably quite a few newcomers, you're probably doing some of these things and didn't even realize. We're going to talk about what's the objective versus the summary, and we will look at some things as it relates to the structure of the resume. So I don't know if everybody can actually see the differences up here, but a functional resume is broken up based on skill set. So you're talking about, things with respect to skills and listing it off that way, as opposed to on the reverse chronological, which is the more common, and the summary of what I'm getting at here is use this and don't use that. And I'll explain why in a second. This is what employers want to see. They want to see, where did you do it? How long did you do it for? What did you accomplish, right? In a reverse chronological order. A functional resume is typically used when, for lack of a better way of putting this, somebody's trying to hide something. Either you are applying for a job that is not the most recent skill that you may have. You might have worked in that capacity before and now you're trying to get back into it. Or, I don't know, you might have had a big gap on your resume and you're trying not to draw attention to it or whatever the case may be. But the functional resume, for all the resumes I've looked at in my life, is one quick scroll through and then a reply, sorry, can't help you, and delete. So obviously stick with the reverse chronological and be as detailed as possible as it relates to each role that you've worked. When it comes to the basics, obviously, contact information. You would be surprised how many resumes I've received in my life where they've forgotten to put simple things like a phone number or an email address. So you might be sending resumes out there and wondering why nobody's getting back to you. Make sure that the contact information is to the forefront. I will go so far as to tell you that if you feel like your resume is too wordy and you need a little white space, and I think I mentioned a piece about white space in a minute, you probably could leave your address off. I mean, nobody really is going to show up at your front door. So if you're taking up a bunch of space based on your address, maybe just leave that off. The other thing is, sometimes people look at the address and think, well, this guy, he lives in Milton. There's no way he's going to work downtown. But I don't know your situation. Maybe you don't mind hopping on the GO train. Maybe you have a car and you don't mind driving out to Vaughan or whatever the case may be. So it doesn't hurt to save some space by leaving your address off. Nobody cares for complex formatting and graphics. If your resume is built with a bunch of tables right now, or those boxes that have, I don't know how to describe them, but if you're using one of those templates, go home, hit copy, open a new Word document, hit paste, and throw that other resume out and never. Nobody wants one of those resumes that have all that structured template in there. Use a proper Word document, bullet point format. If you have pictures in there, leave that stuff out. And by pictures also, when it comes to your photo, and it might be customary where you come from, but here we don't put our passport photos on our resumes. We don't put our passport numbers on our resumes. You don't need your age. You don't need your marital status. You don't put any of that stuff on your resume. And believe it or not, and there might be people here that have it, I know it may be customary overseas. It is definitely not necessary here. Philosophical quotes. If you are touched by something that Abraham Lincoln said, good for you. Keep it to yourself. Nobody wants to see it on your resume. And honestly, it's just another reason why somebody's looking at that thinking to themselves, do I really want to hire this person? And then when it comes to hobbies and interests, I'm kind of torn on this. It really all depends on what your hobbies and interests are. If your hobbies and interests are cooking or poetry, it's probably not that important. For me, for example, if I see somebody who plays team sports, I want to see that because it demonstrates to me that they know how to be part of a team. They know the difference between winning and losing, and they know how to embrace everybody else on their team and do things for the greater good of a team. But the fact that you like to take long walks along the beach, probably not a relevant hobby or interest to be sharing with people on your resume. Or the fact that you enjoy movies. Save that stuff for the interview and get into conversation about it that way. Objective versus summary. So what do you think your objective should be on the resume? So I would tell you, if you have objective on the resume right now, this would probably single-handedly be the biggest waste of space on your resume. Your objective is to get the job you're applying for. That is the objective. So if you wanted to use that space for something much more useful, now's the time. I would probably use that space for a summary versus the objective, and then make sure that my summary is structured specifically to the role that it is that I'm applying for. A banking professional with X amount of years of experience, hands-on using this software, whatever the case may be. But keep it concise and keep it specific to the role that you're actually applying for. Avoid fluff. So these are some things that I guarantee you a lot of people in this room have on their resume right now that think are very useful to have. But I'll tell you why it's not useful to have. Because I've never seen a resume in my life where it says I'm not extremely detail-oriented. I've seen a resume in my life where it says I am not punctual. These are things that are bare minimums that you are expected to be. So why waste space on your resume telling people this? I'm a dedicated worker who puts in extra hours when necessary. I sure hope so. I'm a great team player. Well, I'm going to know pretty quick if you can't get along with people. So there's no point in putting all this stuff on your resume. Bring what's relevant to the top. So if you're applying for a job that is specifically asking for a particular technical skill, let's say it's SAP, I probably shouldn't have the summary of my technical skills on the bottom of page 2 of my resume. I should probably bring that to the top and make sure that it's at the forefront, so that's the first thing that the potential employer sees. Whether it is a technical skill, whether it's a specific industry that they're highlighting, saying that they need to see people from manufacturing, put it in your summary. Put it in a section that talks about industry experience. Whatever it is, make sure you draw it out. Keep your resume organized. So by that I mean, what is it that they've indicated that's important, and detail inside of your resume, as opposed to using the same copy of your resume over and over again. Make sure that you're treating your resume as a living, breathing thing. If you are applying for a role that is asking for specific types of experience and you know you've got it, maybe you have to take some of those bullet points out and put the new ones in. We call it mapping. Mapping the resume so that it is the job description. So looking at the job description and looking at your resume and saying, okay, what have I got? What are they asking for? And have I hit enough of those key points within my resume, as opposed to just the generic resume that I've been sending out over and over and over again. Remember white space. So if your resume, when I open it, is one giant block of font, I'm going to close it and delete it just as fast. You don't need to give every single detail of everything you've ever done and fill from margin to margin. Nobody wants to see that. Keep it short, concise, highlights. right? Give some detail, but people like to see white space. So you have to find that balance between the two. And then consistency. So by this, I'm referring specifically to formatting and fonts. We talked about the boxes and the tables already, but when it comes to fonts, it's okay to make your resume attractive, but stick to a standard format throughout your resume. If you're going to bold certain things, keep them bolded the rest of the way. If you're going to underline certain things, keep them underlined the rest of the way, but don't jump back and forth. When it comes to interview tips, and so a lot of this is going to apply, like we said, as well as when you're out applying directly to a potential employer. There is never an excuse for being late. I know life happens. However, I remember when I was in my job search, I spent my evenings staring at the ceiling and looking at my alarm clock, which I've now set 3 hours earlier than it needed to be, waiting for my alarm to go off so I could hop in the shower, put my suit on, and get to my interview. There is absolutely, in my opinion, no circumstance whatsoever on the most important day of your life that you should be late. Having said that, because life does happen, with the amount of communication and technology we have today, there is zero excuse why you're not sending an email or picking up the phone or whatever the case may be and letting somebody know what's happened and why you're running late. That could be the difference between them accepting it and saying, no problem, understood, get here when you can get here, versus how could you not have taken 30 seconds to pick up the phone or shoot me an email or whatever the case may be to let me know that you're running late. So looking professional is not just the outfit, it's the whole package. Don't bring your resume in a yellow no-frills bag. I'm saying that because I've seen it, right? Don't bring giant purses or whatever the case may be. Have a portfolio that you carry with you. Put your resume in there, neat and tidy. A couple of copies of your resume. If you do not have a portfolio, bring a file folder. It's still better than that yellow no-frills bag. Don't bring all kinds of shopping bags or whatever the case may be. Look professional from beginning to end. Treat everyone courteously. The minute you get off the elevator for your interview, it doesn't matter how bad of a morning or a day you've been having, you need to switch it off and pretend that this is the happiest day of your life. And for the next hour or whatever the case may be, put it all behind you and just focus on smiling and the task at hand. By that I mean, when you walk in and there's a receptionist, if you are disrespectful to that receptionist, your job opportunity is gone. And you may not think that it's as important, but I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, many a time I received an email from my receptionist where they said, your next interview is a jerk. And I'll be like, really? And I'll be like, okay. And I would go and conduct the interview or whatever the case may be. And my job was to coach. And I would get the details and I would sit down in front of that person. I'd be like, so what happened when you arrived? And they'd be all surprised. And I'd say, well, my receptionist sent me a note saying that you mistreated them or you said this. And of course they'd get defensive or whatever the case may be. But I mean, there's no need to be treating anybody that way. And it does get back to the person. So you want to make sure that you're on your game from the minute you walk in the door. Listen carefully to questions and be thoughtful with answers. So one of the biggest challenges that I find with job seekers, and to be frank and honest with you, a lot of new Canadians that are still trying to master the language and comprehension, is that people don't always answer the question they've been asked. If I say to you, are you designated? Don't say to me, I have an MBA. That's not the question. The question was, are you designated? Or if I say to you, have you done this before? And you go off on some tangent about all the other things that you've done except what I've just specifically asked you, you're burying yourself in the interview. Focus on the question that you've actually been asked and answer that question. Which leads nicely into the next point, which is don't ramble. The more you talk, the more you're digging yourself a hole. So once you've gotten to the answer of the question, stop, check for understanding, or say, or feel free to ask, did that answer your question? And let them tell you. was looking for a little more detail as it related to this. And then feel free to continue and dig in. But try to time yourself mentally and catch yourself from continuing on when it's not necessary. Obviously, look interested and be prepared. So your body language speaks a lot when you're in there. If you're slouching forward like this, or you look tired, crossing your arms is a sign of being closed off. You're slouching in your chair, whatever the case may be. It's all being caught by the interviewer. So, like I said, from the minute you get off the elevator, fake it. You have to be in the best mood you can possibly be in for the next hour or whatever it is that you're going to be in that room. And then don't beg for a job. So if somebody says to you, why do you want this job? The answer is not, right now I'll take any job. The answer is, well, I feel I'm a great fit for this role because these are the skills I bring to the table, right? Be professional about it. Nothing turns people off more than sounding desperate. You may not get that opportunity, but that's okay. There will be other opportunities, but most importantly, be sincere about what it is you believe that you bring to the table, so that makes you qualified for that particular job opportunity. Internet and social media. I don't think I need to tell anybody that you are probably being Googled. Everybody is going to type your name in nowadays. I'd be surprised if people in here didn't type my name in, or they came in and thought, who is this Rafi guy anyway? So if there are things out there that are within your control to take down that are not necessarily flattering or professional, my advice would be take them down. And having said that, while you're in the job search, maybe be more cognizant of the things that you are allowing to get out there. Looking at this room of professionals, I don't think some of the things I'm thinking of are going to be that great of a concern, but hey, I don't know what everybody's lives are like outside of these four walls, so just be cognizant of it, that people are looking. Leverage your internet tools. So I know I said to you about the thing about job searching online, and it's just being, surfing the web. Use Indeed, use LinkedIn, use Workopolis, apply directly on websites. I'm not saying don't do that, but I am telling you that 10 to 15% of your total job search time is what should be spent online, and spend the rest of the time pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, talking to people. Separate your personal from your professional. If your LinkedIn photo is a selfie, or if it's you and the family at the beach, or it's you and your dog, change your photo. Your LinkedIn profile is your virtual resume. So that is the place where you want to put a professional picture of yourself. It's not where you need to share with people that this is your lovely family and this is your pet or whatever the case may be. And it shouldn't be a picture of you with your tan from the vacation that you took, wearing bright fluorescent colored tank top or whatever the case may be. A professional outfit, professional photo. And advertise yourself. I did mention earlier, it's okay to say on your LinkedIn profile, currently seeking an opportunity that is, let people know you're in the market. It's okay to do that. And it is okay to reach out to people on LinkedIn to, ask them for advice or guidance or whatever the case may be. Just don't expect everybody to have time to have coffee with you. Because I get 30 of those requests a week. And if I said yes to everybody, I'd spend a lot of time having coffee. So it's okay to ask people for advice. It's okay to ask people for guidance. And if they're offering you the time, sure, get out there and have a coffee with them. But just don't be upset or take it personally when somebody isn't able to give you that kind of personal time. And last but not least, we talked about some of these already. Avoid silly mistakes. So first and foremost, the personal one, don't spell names incorrectly. Triple check it before you send it off. One time I sent an email to a client and I realized I spelled her name wrong, and I picked up the phone and called her immediately to apologize to her. And she said, I didn't even notice. And I said, well, I did. So I know it's a big thing. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Don't apply for every job under the sun, meaning if you're looking to get your foot in the door and you're focused on something at the accounting operations clerical level, stick to that. But if you're applying to the same organization as a senior financial analyst, you're losing credibility. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking to myself, Is this guy an SFA or is he an AP clerk? Which one does he want to be? Focus on a particular area and apply for that only. Don't forget to leave your contact details. I've returned every phone call anybody has ever made to me in the 15 years that I've been doing this. The only ones that I have not returned are the ones who did not give me their phone number. And believe it or not, there are people who leave you messages and they've practiced their elevator pitches and they thought, great, I got Rafi's number. I'm going to leave him a message now. And they leave me this great message about their background and their professional profile and their experience and all this other kind of stuff. And they say, please call me back. And they hang up. They didn't give me a phone number. If you are in the midst of a job search right now and you do not have voicemail, get it. That is a fundamental that I cannot stress enough. Believe it or not, there are people out there that are in the midst of a job search that have phones that do not have voicemails. How is the recruiter or the employer going to get you? Or how are you going to know that they called? And most importantly, if you have a voicemail, delete your messages, because there's nothing more frustrating when I hear the voicemail box belonging to is full. And so I'm just moving on to the next person, because how do I get in touch with you? We talked a little bit about taking feedback. Don't get emotional. I know that the job search can be difficult. There was a time where I was in between jobs, where I was downsized from one bank, and it took me some time before I found another opportunity, and it's not fun having to look for a job. But most importantly, when somebody's telling you, you know what, unfortunately, you're not qualified for this opportunity, the second you get emotional and you get defensive is the second I think this person is unprofessional. So it's better to receive and accept that type of feedback and maybe ask questions. What am I qualified for? What kind of role would you consider me for? Versus getting upset about the fact that you're not being considered for a particular opportunity. And I hope I didn't whip through that too fast, but we're on to questions.
First, goal of mine is to I'm basically what extent does it hold true? Because it sounds very awkward, me at least. Not necessarily so 10 years, more than 10 years of experience. Just display something within the span of 10 years. Don't mention to Edward as a controller, or because you know what? You do not have a CPA yet. You do not have any Canadian market or a company on your resume. You're gonna get it. Need your advice on this, please. Probably many of my other colleagues could have faced it. I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I would not say what people might be suggesting to you. Oh, yes, sorry. I'm talking into this microphone. So the question was with respect to overseas experience and the extent of the experience, and when sending your resume out locally, how much would we potentially discount the level of experience that we have, because you know, sometimes it might look like the individual's overqualified or has too much experience. And so my answer to that would be, sometimes you need to craft your resume and tailor it a little bit more based on the nature of the opportunity that you are applying for. So there's a bigger thing to look at here. For example, if I am a VP of finance or a CFO level person here, I may go to Pakistan and I may not get a VP of finance or CFO level job there. I should expect that I'm probably going to need to look at something a step or two back to prove myself and earn my way. Having said that, because of the level of your experience, the first thing people are going to see is overqualified. So it's not lying to shorten your resume and maybe cut off some of your previous experience. It's just tailoring your resume to be a little bit more relevant to the opportunity that you're applying for. And then, if it comes up in discussion, remember the first step is getting in the door to have the interview. If it comes up in the discussion, at that point it's on you to sell yourself as, look, I've got all this other experience. I'm here today because I need to build myself here. And be as honest as, I'm not looking to get 6 months of experience and leave you. I'm looking to build a career with this organization. But people aren't necessarily wrong, depending on how they're delivering it to you, when they say to you, you might want to shorten some of your experience because you need to get your foot in the door. And if getting your foot in the door means at an opportunity that may not have been at the level that you were accustomed to overseas, you might want to make yourself look a little, I don't want to say less qualified, but maybe not as qualified or as experienced that your resume may currently show. Does that answer your question? Is that a fair answer for you? So the follow-up question is about changing titles on resumes to maybe lessen the overall experience or stature. So if somebody was a controller, maybe not indicating that they were a controller. I'm going to give you the answer from the heart. I don't believe necessarily in being dishonest on a resume. I think leaving experience off is very different than changing what your title is. I mean, that's the nature of my opinion. And yeah.
So,
Talk into this.
Yeah, into this or this?
Yeah,
What?
both.
So I work primarily, if you change your title, they will catch it. So a background check that's done by any of the major background check providers includes usually an employment check, and they're usually done by Sterling Backcheck. And one of the things that they confirm is your title. And if your title is not the equivalent, so if you've put you're an SFA and you're actually a controller, it'll make you ineligible for hire. So it's an area that I understand why people say to do that, but it's also not representative of what you actually done. So you have to be careful to present yourself as good as possible for a position, but you need to be honest. And where people change their titles completely or their job descriptions to kind of bring down a level of seniority, it looks dishonest, and employers don't really like to see that. So you have to be really careful with that. I mean, I've even had background checks get failed because someone said they were a senior accountant and they were a senior financial analyst. Now, those are things we can clear up, but if you go from saying, I'm an SFA and you're actually a controller, it's not going to sit well with a lot of the major employers that we work with downtown.
But be honest. Next question.
I have a question. He's asking, how could you sell yourself to LinkedIn, like mentioning looking for opportunity while you are still at job and your colleagues and bosses are connected with you through LinkedIn?
First of all, I don't have to repeat that question because it was for the online people, or do I need to repeat that one? Okay, so the question was, how do you sell yourself on LinkedIn when you are currently employed and you don't want your bosses or colleagues to know that you're looking for a job? So then I wouldn't change my my highlight line on LinkedIn to say currently seeking opportunities. And I will even caution you to let you know that there is a function within LinkedIn that you check off that says currently seeking opportunities, which is visible on the LinkedIn Recruiter product. Now, people from your own company can't see it. However, people from other companies can. So if there is a potential connection between the two, and I mean, we're rolling the dice that this exists, but somebody else would be able to call your company. Maybe they know your manager and they say, hey, did you know that so-and-so has their status set up as currently seeking opportunities. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's entitled to look for a job. I just don't think I would advertise that in my highlight line on LinkedIn. But I might be proactive about reaching out to people on LinkedIn and saying I'm looking for a job opportunity.
So, person, should we talk to our existing boss before accepting?
I would probably, yeah, I would say if you're applying within, so the question was, should we speak to our existing boss before a new opportunity? I would think that if you are working within that company and it's another opportunity within that company, I think that that's normally probably pretty appropriate to speak to your manager. But if you've received an offer from an external organization, I don't think talking to your current boss is the right way to go. I think you need to make that decision for yourself and what's the best thing to do for you, your family, or the bigger picture of, you know, your situation. I would also go so far as to caution you from accepting counteroffers. There's a statistic out there, and it's some ungodly number about the amount of people who accept counteroffers that are gone from the organization within 3 to 6 months. You have to think of it as, if the company really valued you that much, why did they wait for you to quit before they offered you that extra money? It's only because now you have them and they don't want to get stuck without manpower that they're like, okay, maybe we need to bump up their pay or give them the new title or whatever the case may be. But if you've put yourself on the market and you're looking for a new opportunity, you need to be convicted about the fact that you're doing this for a reason and it's time to move on. If the opportunity that's being offered to you in the end isn't suitable or not what you thought it was going to turn into, don't take it. But I certainly wouldn't go to my existing boss and say, hey, so I got this job offer. What do you think about it? Should I accept it? Wouldn't be my recommendation. Okay? So the question was, with respect to bringing the relevant experience to the top of the resume, if, for example, that particular experience wasn't from your most recent role, but it may have been from a previous role. And I believe you've answered the question, to be honest with you. That would be the very reason why you would highlight it at the top. Because if, for example, your last role was, say, in general accounting, or you were in a project that was a system implementation, but the role before that was FP&A experience, and that's what you're trying to get into, then I would make sure that my summary reads as a professional who has X amount of years of FP&A experience from this industry or whatever the case may be. That's why I would bring it to the top of the resume, because you may not get that second scroll beyond that point. Well, no, I wouldn't alter the chronological order of it, because the experience is from where I got the experience from. The object of the summary or that highlight is to do exactly that, to summarize or highlight as it relates to that particular role. If you've caught my attention on that, I'm going to scroll to find out where is it from. And if it's attractive enough to me in the role previous, I'm not going to rule you out. I'm going to look and say, okay, so clearly she was on this ERP implementation project. Oh, there's her FP&A experience. And if it's suitable and it's adequate and it's qualified, it's good enough.
My name is Yasser. My question is related. Put all the job description anywhere in the resume, and it goes past the ATS, and it reaches to the human hiring manager. And if it's the resume is similar to job description, almost similar, then what does the hiring manager will feel about it? Will he or she will that just similar to job descriptions, like copy pasted to job description, or
Great question. So the question was, when your resume has made it past, based on the job description, and you have mapped your resume to reflect your experience as it relates to the job description, it makes it past the applicant tracking system to the hiring manager's hands, and the worry is the resume mirroring the job description too much to the point of should we be copying and pasting? And so the answer is no, don't copy and paste. But if it's telling you 2 years of experience with SAP, I would put in my resume, utilized SAP to dump data and perform reconciliations. If it says 6 years of bank reconciliation experience, I would put bank reconciliation experience on multiple high volume bank accounts and foreign exchange. But I would not copy and paste into my resume. I would just make sure I'm looking at the job description as a checklist, and I'm using my resume to make sure I'm checking off everything on the list. And the more checks I have, the more comfortable I should feel that I'm qualified for this position. But the point of mapping it, like we're talking about, is exactly what you mentioned, to get past the applicant tracking system. Because a lot of the people at the first level, all they're doing is keyword searches, right? Oracle financials. You don't have Oracle financials in your resume, it's not going to get past the first cut, especially if it's saying must-haves. If you have the must-haves, but you don't have them in your resume, you might as well not submit your resume. Does that make sense? Good question. So the question, sorry. So the question was for a Pakistani CA, and is it necessary or inevitable to have to get a local CPA in order to continue your career or, continue your job? So what I would tell you is, with respect to localizing yourself into any market, is if you don't pursue the local designation, eventually you're going to hit a ceiling, and you have to come to that expectation that the higher the role goes, the more justification for the necessity of that designation. So if you don't want to pursue it, you're going to limit yourself, because there will be a certain amount of roles within that chain where the hiring manager will be acceptable to the fact that foreign experience, foreign designation, but then you're going to hit a ceiling and you won't be considered for roles beyond that because you're not showing progressive, pursuing a local designation, or more importantly, becoming familiarized with, what comes with a local designation, what regulations, what tax implications, whatever the case may be. Yeah. So the question is, for the mid-level jobs, is it required? And I'm going to say for the mid-level jobs, it's not going to be always required, but to make yourself more attractive, employers want to see people that are enrolled and pursuing. In a competitive market, if you're up against the person who is enrolled and pursuing, you're going to lose. Yeah.
And the other thing that we see a lot as well is that your designation matters the most when you're unemployed. like frankly speaking. If you're already internal in a company and you're looking to move around, especially with like the RBCs, the CIBCs, the BMOs of the world, they're already going to know you and they're going to know what you're able to do. So having, not a local designation might not matter as much. But as soon as you find yourself part of a restructure, a layoff, which in our current environment we see often, it matters so much what designation you have, because you're going to go to the market against people who have local designations. So it's really, for each of you, it's going to be a different choices to whether or not it makes sense, what the timing of that looks like. It's certainly a lot of studying and it's a big undertaking, so you have to consider your family life that goes along with that. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where you do get restructured or laid off later down the line, it really helps you to have that local designation.
Thank you.
I would like to ask a question. Like up to what extent we can maneuver or change our jobs? Because there might be certain instances that SFP in a company, but he might not be doing all the roles of an SFP which does in an individual company. So is it okay to put any additional depending on the prospective employer requirement? And in continuation of this thing, is there any possibility that prospective employer ever contacts the previous employer regarding job description?
So let me see if I understood this correctly. The question was, how much could you manipulate like the job description on your resume as it relates to the job you're applying to? And you're saying like other jobs that you would include. I missed that part.
What he meant to say.
So,
I think.
So are you saying that like what the actual job description from your previous employer was versus what you actually did?
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate further. What I'm trying to ask is, person is a usual senior financial analyst in any company, like 10 different kinds of roles. But that person in that company is only doing like 3 or 4 of those roles, and is not doing all those roles. Or he might do any additional role specifically for that company because that was asked by that employer. So is that okay to change your job description from what you actually did? Because if you are writing something in resume, you do know from your past experience, but you actually did not, you didn't do that thing with that employer. So first my question is that, and second, is there any possibility that the prospective employer where you are going to join, he could ever call the previous employer that this person really did these things?
Sure. So I think when I mentioned the first half of your question, I did get it in the right context. So my simple answer to you would be your resume should be representative of exactly what you did. Don't get caught up in the title and what that might look like in another organization. If you did it, put it in your resume. If it happened to be from a previous job, make sure it's in the previous job. Don't put it in the current job if you didn't do that. Which leads into the second part of your question, which was, would a potential employer reach out to your past employer to verify a job description? And I would tell you, maybe. I mean, there are so many intertwined relationships and tight-knit industries that I wouldn't risk it. And it goes on all the time. There are times that I put a candidate forward on a job where the manager will look at the company and say, you know what? I know somebody over there, and before you know it, they're calling you back and telling you, yeah, we're not going to hire this person because I just made like a informal call to one of my contacts over there, and you know they didn't have great things to say about them, or whatever the case may be. I know you're suggesting it from a different perspective in terms of verifying the job, but the point is that you never know who's connected. You also don't know nowadays that it might take somebody 2 seconds to go on LinkedIn and look for a manager from your previous company and shoot them off a quick note to say, hey, I'm considering hiring this individual. You know, this is what they're saying their job description is. Can you verify that for me?
I would just like to add that you have to be honest and factual as well. So I would say don't worry about the job description, what you had, but write what you actually did.
Yeah.
Yeah, just following up on that. So sometimes there's a lot of things in your job description, but you don't do that. So you don't have to write. You should only write what you actually did. And sometimes there are a lot of things that is not in the job description, but you did. So you should write.
For sure.
So just be factual and honest.
Yep.
My name is
Yep.
so what's the best way to one day?
Sure. So the question was, as it relates to the presentation and specifically pounding the pavement as part of the job search, what's the best way to get people to actually see you? And my answer to you would be, you need to exhaust all avenues. I think the message I was trying to convey there is, if you're just sitting at home in front of your laptop and you're submitting resumes through Indeed or applying to company websites online and you're considering that a job search, that's probably not going to get you the traction that you're looking for. But starting off with, for example, making a list of 10 companies that you're genuinely interested in and picking up the phone and calling people at those companies and delivering your elevator pitch. And if you get a voicemail, even better. I mean, you may be a bit nervous about talking to a live person, be prepared for it, and maybe practice by leaving yourself messages first so you can hear what you sound like and try to keep it as concise as possible. But that would be the first step. And then as you're talking to people, it's asking for FaceTime. But I literally do mean, when I say pounding the pavement, like knocking on doors, going out there, and you're probably going to achieve more success at this at a small or mid-sized company than you are showing up at TD Bank Tower and saying, okay, I'm here. Like, where do you begin, right? But in like certain smaller business parks, for example, where the companies are a bit more accessible and there's a warm person at the front desk to speak to, it may not hurt to actually get out with hand-delivered resumes so that one person out there is going to say, hey, you know what? I really like what this guy's doing. So the question was, once again, for the amount of volume of emails going out, like what can somebody do to actually get somebody to see you? And so my first part of that answer would be, don't have the expectation that somebody's going to see you. But my next part of the answer would be, how targeted and focused are you being in the people you're reaching out to? So I don't know what your background is, but for example, who let this guy in here? Okay. For the record, he's not in accounting. So I like, for example, somebody else had mentioned that they were in pharmaceutical from back home or whatever the case may be. So that would probably be the first place I'm targeting, right? Unless I'm just dead set against going back to pharmaceutical, which is a whole other story. But if I'm looking for what's the best way for myself to get my foot in the door, I need to target myself at where am I going to be a value add to the potential employer. If you are a pharmaceutical background, but you're applying to banking, they're not interested in you. They might be if they met you or they met you at a party and thought, wow, this guy has great skills, and you might have great skills, but you're talking about what's going to catch their eye. And your resume from pharmaceutical is not going to catch the banking and finance person's eye. So that would be my first thing that I would suggest is be focused. Like, what did you do back home? What industry were you working in? What technical skills do you bring to the table? And who out there can actually use what I bring to the table? This is not a big trade secret in terms of what it is we do. This is how we create jobs. If you came in and met me as a particular candidate, I'm going to look at your profile and I'm going to say, okay, this guy's worked 6 years at a hospital. He's got SAP experience. Before that, he was working as, I don't know, a SFA at Coca-Cola. So I'm going to call all the bottling companies out there and see who might be interested in him. Like, that's what we do. There's no rocket science to it. That's where the value add is. So that an employer looks and says, oh, look at that. This guy actually has relevant industry experience. I don't need to teach him about how the environment works or how the numbers work here or how the system works or whatever the case may be.
And Canada, but that's how do you see the structure person and things, but some person is PSI good public sector and fresh CP. How do you see the delta between these persons?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's how do I view somebody who might be foreign designated, CA from Pakistan, who's got 15 years experience versus a local, freshly designated CPA who's coming out of the firm? So here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't decide. The employer does. I will happily get anybody a job who the employer is going to pay me for. The truth of the matter is, the employer is going to pay me, and depending on what it is they're looking for, if you want the honest truth, right now, a newly minted CPA coming out of the firm is like a bar of gold. That's what everybody wants. So it's not to say that your experience is not good or not attractive or not relevant. If you're comparing yourself to that, I mean, that's just something that is just extremely in demand here, right? So I would make sure that I'm focusing myself in opportunities where maybe I don't need to necessarily compete with that directly. I'm not sure if, I did repeat the question for the online people. You guys got that?
One is Canadian experience. I'm a bit confused. One thought process that for that because that was Canadian experience. Other thought process.
So the question was, when you're a newcomer arriving, this individual's feedback that they were receiving was either hold out for the right job so you're not starting at the bottom, versus the other half, which was like, yeah, take something that is. So, I mean, two ways of looking at it. Every individual needs to make the decision for themselves in terms of what their risk tolerance and what their personal situation allows for. If I'm arriving here as a newcomer and I have a family and I have to support people or whatever the case may be, I might be much more amenable to taking an opportunity that is a few steps back in order to get myself out into the marketplace. If I've come with means where I can be a little bit more patient and hunt for something that's probably a little closer to my level, then maybe I'm going to do that too. Here's the caveat that I'll throw out there. The one thing, regardless of either side, that you'll want to be cognizant of and avoid wherever possible is the gap. So if you both arrive tomorrow and one person snatches up the first thing, that might be that's in accounting, but is not at the level they were hoping for, versus the person who holds out and says, I'm going to get that SFA opportunity. I know it's out there for me. And all of a sudden, 6 months, 8 months go by. You've now made yourself far less marketable because of it. So you're always more employable when you have less of a gap versus now creating a reason why an employer is going to look at your resume and say, what's wrong with this guy? Especially in this market, when we're talking the lowest unemployment in 4 decades, the first thing I'm looking at when I see that gap on the resume is, wow, like I can understand if they've been looking since maybe February, but since September in this market, like what's wrong with you? There's so many things out there that you could be doing, even if it's contract work, and maybe that's your story. Look, I'm qualified to do this. Why'd you accept this? I just arrived in Canada. It was offered to me as a contract. I wanted to keep busy. I thought it was better than sitting at home watching Price is Right.
Thank you, everybody.
My pleasure. Do you need this for the online people? Thank you. No problem. Okay. ये ले लें, ज़रूरत नहीं होगी ना?
Okay. First of all, I would like to start by thanking Rafi for the time he took out of his busy schedule to come here and present to us how we can all strive in this Canadian environment and also thrive in this environment. Personally, I learned a lot. The 3 key things to take back for me are, yes, the resume is important, and it's very important to be ready to meet your recruiter. You have to be ready, just like you will get ready for your wedding day or wedding night. And I think one of the key things for me is to be out there, like Rafi was saying, to hit the pavement, to go there and meet people. And I think understanding that we're all we're social animals, we need that relationship, and building those relationships is the key to getting you that job. I would, as a token of our appreciation, Rafi and your team, I would like to ask Rauf Ali Jan, the president of Canada chapter of ICAP, to present Rafi with a gift from us, please. For Kelly, we have, and and Nabil. We'll give him an opportunity. Thank you, guys. All right.